Joe Schmidt joins me now. Joost, welcome.
Pleasure to be with you.
Joost, the NEO exchange has acquired a bit of momentum since the last time we chatted, which I guess was about a year ago, and it has found particular interest for a lot of the cannabis issuers. And as such, I have actually come to appreciate the difference between NEO and the TSX and CSE exchanges. And I think that among the principal values are primarily the absence of high-frequency traders. Now, can you maybe give us an overview of how that differentiates the trading in issuers on NEO relative to other exchanges that suffer from the presence of HFT?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm very happy that you noticed that there is a difference and that the exchange works in a different way. And that, what were maybe words a year ago, a year and a half ago, are now clearly becoming a reality. Now, what is the difference? As I probably said last time also, we are not anti-HFT, so we're happy to welcome them. But what we expect is that, they show certain type of behavior. And you have mechanisms in our trading model that prevent predatory, opportunistic behaviors that lead to more price volatility, that lead to market makers, real market makers, not being willing to quote because they are continuously taken out by people that are faster to the market. And that now starts to work, and we see it in our own listings. And I often take a security as an example. That is Halo Labs, one of the early ones to list with us, and they have had an incredible journey on our exchange. Their volume is equivalent to their peers, while there is a lesser participation from high-frequency trading firms, but their price resilience has been stronger than that of their peers. And in the peers, I include companies that are listed on TSX or TSXV or CSE. Same market cap, same price level. I also compare them to some of the larger caps listed on the CSE, and you see, quality liquidity, better price resilience. I think that is what a good trading model can achieve.
Sure. So is the NEO, was it designed in mind to attract companies that are more mature than, say, just the typical startup of a TSX venture company that has no revenue and no real business yet?
Well, absolutely. I think that is one of the key elements that we always stress. So we are a senior exchange, as we call it in Canada. So we do not list venture companies. So we do not list companies that don't comply with a certain number of core principles in how they operate from a governance, controls, financial reporting perspective, or that do not achieve our listing standards. So I would say from that perspective, from an exchange status perspective, we are equivalent to the TSX. And I think it's important because it's a different brand, a different label that you give to a company. When a company goes there, there's a better level of comfort with the investor that company is a company that's at the right level of maturity. And a venture exchange is a venture exchange, and that comes with the risks and the choices that you make as an investor. Think about what the rules are when you invest in venture companies. Well, that will also apply in a venture exchange. And our view is, and has always been, that in fact, the vast majority of those companies should probably not be publicly listed, and that if you go public and you come, you have a responsibility and accountability versus investors, and you are subject to a totally different burden than when you're not public. Well, we think that you need to be ready for that, and I don't think that venture companies in general are ready for public listing, and then you get orphan stocks.
So what are the key criteria that differentiate a senior exchange like NEO from a venture exchange?
Yeah, I think the one key component, and that is defined in securities legislation here in Canada. Securities legislation very clearly identified venture companies and non-venture companies. That's what they call it, which is quite funny. You could have expected venture and senior, or they call it venture and non-venture. So venture are the senior companies. And if they go public, they have a different set of requirements that they need to fulfill. So a good example that I talked about earlier, governance. So you need, for a senior company, you need to have a full governance model implemented with the right independent directors, the right committees in place. You don't have that on a venture company. Not unimportant. When you look at some issues and challenges we've seen lately with some of the venture companies, if the right governance was in place, would probably not have happened.
Right.
Controls, you need to have the right financial controls in place. Make sure that the data and the financials that are being provided are supported by a robust control environment. Your reporting is different. You need to report more information more regularly. You need to keep your investors abreast of what's happening in a more formal way. When you go public, you need to provide more information. Your audited financials need to cover 3 years rather than 2 years. So you get a lot of elements that give you much more confidence about the robustness of the company and the robustness of the information that they provide you with. So that is one side. The other side is, what do you need to comply with to list on the senior exchange? So that's beyond the securities legislation, difference between venture and non-venture. Well, there we have standards. So we say that the company can choose one of our standards. We have 4 standards that we apply. We use a very similar model as NASDAQ, which is different than the TSX model, and I think a bit more straightforward and easier to understand, where either you can apply under our market capitalization standard. You need to have a market cap of at least 50 million. You can apply under our net income standard, which is, by the way, more stringent than the TSX, where you need to have a minimum net income of $750,000. And then we have a shareholder equity standard, and we have a assets and revenue standards. So we have 4 standards, and what those 4 standards allow you to do is to cover all the different types of industries and companies that may want to come to your market. Because you said earlier, you only take companies that generate net income or generate revenue, maybe you said. Well, I think, that will apply, that is one standard that we have, but I think that if you only look at net income, there's quite a few very large cap companies in the US that today would not be listed on NASDAQ or NYSE. So you cannot totally be restrictive and say there always has to be net income. No, it comes more down to the maturity of the company, where it is in its life cycle, and you can have tech companies that are extremely successful that are still not generating net income, and
right.
they're publicly listed, but they have substantial market caps. So
Sure.
different standards.
Ultimately, adding up to a more investor-friendly environment with less risk.
Well, that is the key for me, and that is also what we said at the very beginning of NEO. We want to create a different experience, and that experience is, on the one side, for the investor, give them better quality of execution. We talked a bit about that in the beginning, but also give them a high level of comfort about the companies that are listed on NEO. The companies are listed on NEO, and today CSC and NEO are the only 2 markets that list companies with US assets. That they comply with a totally different set of standards, and
Sure.
that makes a big difference. And that is important for investors, and then for the capital raising companies, we help them in the process. We are a very customer-focused exchange, so we're very agile. We help them find solutions in unique situations, but we also help them, which is very unique, with investor awareness. We have some programs ourselves. We support them. We talk with them. We give them our views and recommendations around, what are the things that you need to pay attention to when you go public.
Right.
Because some of them, don't necessarily have all that experience, even if they are ready as a company and they're mature. But going public comes, I always say going public is like opening a new business line.
Sure.
You need to have people and resources that are going to take care of that.
Sure. One of the companies trading on the NEO is Halo Labs, which is a US-based cannabis company. Is there an issue? I mean, obviously the TSX has declined the business of US-based cannabis companies as part of some agreement with Homeland Security. NEO has not found that is a restrictive element, having a company like Halo that's actually operating in cannabis in the US?
Absolutely not. So we did our homework. We are an organization, that did not embrace that concept immediately. And why is that? Because we wanted to do a full assessment from a legal perspective. We wanted to understand, what are the potential risks, issues that could come from listing those types of companies. And we worked with both US and Canadian counsel. So we're talking now about, probably a year back or something like that, or a little bit more than that. And, out of that assessment, we felt absolutely comfortable to do it. So I think it's a choice that you make, and that is showing a totally different side of NEO. We're also a very progressive exchange, and we want to support markets and industries that we believe are going to be a very important part of tomorrow. Like, if everyone was sitting back and doing nothing, I think we would have a market and an industry that would be suffering, that would be having a very hard time to find financing. The entire evolution and emergence, you've seen that of SPACs, has been a great way of providing capital to companies with lots of potential, and that is, that leads to value creation, that leads to employment, that leads to growing an economy. And I think that's the kind of decisions you have to be able to make and support as a stock exchange.
Right. All right, Joost, that's great. Great update on NEO. It's obviously gaining traction. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.